But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace.
Today, we're diving into the Reagan Revolution, the conservative resurgence of the 1980s. Welcome to U.S. in History by Liberty Flagpoles, where we explore the people, events, and ideas that have shaped our nation.
Hello, I'm your host, Sam. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of Reagan's presidency, let's take a quick look at his background. Ronald Reagan was born in 1911 in Illinois, and he had a pretty interesting career before he became the 40th President of the United States. He worked as a lifeguard, a radio broadcaster, and even served in the military before breaking into Hollywood as an actor. You might have seen him in films like King's Row or Knute Rockne, All-American.
Mr. Gipp has kindly consented to carry the ball for the Scrubs. Just call any play you like, and it all. They're all the same to him. All right.
In the early 1950s, Reagan transitioned to television and hosted the General Electric Theater, a popular anthology series. During this time, he also became involved in Republican politics and began giving speeches on behalf of the party. In 1964, Reagan gave a speech in support of Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater, which gained him national attention and helped to launch his political career. In 1966, Reagan was elected governor of California, defeating incumbent Governor Pat Brown. As governor, Reagan implemented a number of conservative policies, including tax cuts and deregulation. He also supported the Vietnam War and law and order initiatives. But the 1970s were a tough decade for the United States. The economy was in shambles, and there was a general sense of malaise and discontent. Enter Ronald Reagan, who ran for president in 1980 on a platform of lower taxes, a stronger national defense, and a return to traditional values. And guess what? He won in a landslide. The 1980s were a time of significant political and economic change in the United States, marked by the election of President Ronald Reagan and the implementation of his conservative policies. The conservative resurgence of the 1980s had a significant impact on American culture and society, and its effects are still felt today.
Let's take a brief second to discuss who makes these videos possible. Are you looking for engaging and informative content about American history? Look no further than U.S. in History, brought to you by Liberty Flagpoles. From the Revolutionary War to modern times, we cover it all. Subscribe now and join us on our journey through the past. Check out Liberty Flagpoles at www.libertyflagpoles.com for all your flag and flagpole needs.
Once in office, Reagan wasted no time implementing his policies. One of the key policies of the Reagan Revolution was the implementation of supply-side economics, also known as Reaganomics. This economic theory argued that lowering taxes and reducing regulation would stimulate economic growth and increase government revenue. Reagan implemented a series of tax cuts, including the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981, which reduced income tax rates across the board. He also reduced regulations on businesses and industries, including the deregulation of the airline and trucking industries. One of the main objectives of Reaganomics was to reduce inflation, which had been a problem in the 1970s. In this regard, the policies were largely successful, as inflation fell significantly during Reagan's presidency. However, the policies also contributed to rising budget deficits, as the tax cuts reduced government revenue. Reaganomics also had an impact on economic growth. The economy did experience some growth during Reagan's presidency, but it is difficult to attribute this solely to his economic policies. Some economists argue that other factors, such as technological innovation and increased global trade, also contributed to economic growth during this period. Overall, the outcome of Reaganomics is complex and continues to be debated by economists and policymakers. Some argue that the policies were successful in boosting economic growth and reducing inflation, while others argue that they benefited the wealthy at the expense of the middle and lower classes. He pursued a more aggressive stance towards the Soviet Union and played a key role in its eventual collapse. Reagan's tough stance on the Soviet Union including his famous Evil Empire speech.
Let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
Helped to pressure the Soviet government. He negotiated with Mikhail Gorbachev to reduce nuclear arsenals and ultimately helped to end the Cold War. Beyond this, he appointed a number of conservative judges to the federal bench, including the Supreme Court. One of his most controversial nominations was that of Robert Bork to the Supreme Court in 1987. Bork, a conservative legal scholar, was widely viewed as a strict constructionist, meaning he believed in interpreting the Constitution according to its original meaning. However, Bork's nomination was met with widespread opposition from Democrats and civil rights groups who were concerned about his views on issues like abortion and civil rights. Ultimately, the Senate rejected Bork's nomination, making him the first Supreme Court nominee to be rejected since the 1930s. Reagan also appointed Antonin Scalia, another conservative justice, to the Supreme Court in 1986. Scalia, who served until his death in 2016, was known for his strict constructionist views and his influence on the court's conservative wing. Reagan's appointments to the federal bench helped to shift the balance of the courts in a more conservative direction, and many of his appointees continue to serve on the bench today. But Reagan's presidency wasn't all smooth sailing. Just a few months into his first term, he was the victim of an assassination attempt, but he recovered and remained in office. As he was leaving a hotel in Washington, D.C., Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr., a troubled man who later claimed he was trying to impress actress Jodie Foster. Reagan was shot in the chest and arm, and the bullet narrowly missed his heart. He was rushed to the hospital, where he underwent surgery and was in critical condition for several days. Despite the severity of his injuries, Reagan made a swift recovery and was back to work within a few weeks. In the aftermath of the assassination attempt, Reagan's popularity soared as the public rallied around him. He later joked about the incident, saying that he had broken the record for the number of times a president has been shot without dying. The assassination attempt on Reagan was a reminder of the dangers faced by those in public office, and it underscored the importance of security measures to protect the president and other government officials. The 1980s were also a time of conservative resurgence, with the rise of groups like the Moral Majority, a Christian conservative organization focused on issues like abortion and school prayer. The Moral Majority was formed in response to what its founders saw as a decline in traditional values in the United States. The organization advocated for a number of conservative causes, including opposition to abortion, support for traditional marriage, and opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. The Moral Majority was instrumental in mobilizing Christian voters and supporting conservative candidates. It played a key role in the election of Ronald Reagan as president in 1980 and continued to support conservative candidates throughout the 1980s. These groups had a significant influence on politics and culture in the 1980s, and their influence is still felt today.
So there you have it, a brief look at the Reagan Revolution and the conservative resurgence of the 1980s. We hope you learned something new and gained a deeper understanding of this important period in American history. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more great content on American history. Also, don't forget to stop by www.libertyflagpoles.com for all of your flag and flagpole needs. See you soon.
The goal is world peace. That must be our prime responsibility. We are the leader of the free world whether we want to be or not, and therefore we are the only ones that can preserve the peace. And to do that, we must have strength.